Welcome back to my series of MCU reviews. I'm going to be reviewing Iron Man 2 today. I've already reviewed the first Iron Man. I've already reviewed Incredible Hulk. You guys know that I'm building up my series of MCU reviews heading into Infinity War, which comes out April 27th. And so we have reached the third film in the MCU, Iron Man 2. And just like the other reviews, there will be some spoilers. So if you have not seen Iron Man 2, which came out in 2010, I believe, you should exit this video and go watch Iron Man 2 and then come back and watch this video, because I'm going to spoil some shit. So let's be honest. It came out 8 years ago, so if you haven't seen it by now, you just didn't care about it. Iron Man 2 once again stars Robert Downey Jr. as the title character of Iron Man. It once again stars Gwyneth Paltrow as Pepper Potts. Don Cheadle joins the cast this time as Rhodey, his best friend from the first movie that was played by Terrence Howard in that movie, but in this one is Don Cheadle, which I can't lie, that's kind of an upgrade. We also feature some cameos from Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury. It also features Scarlett Johansson. Her first full-time role as the Black Widow was in this movie. Iron Man 2 picks up a little bit after the first Iron Man ended. When you come out to the world like he did at the end of the first Iron Man movie and he reveals, hey, I'm Iron Man. Well, you can imagine that shit would probably hit the fan after that. This movie opens up with Iron Man trying to explain to a Senate subcommittee why he can't share his technology or his weapons with the world, in particular the U.S. military. Iron Man's a free spirit. He's basically telling the governments of the world to go fuck themselves. He's not going to help them harm innocent people by putting his weapons into the hands of people who would cause harm. Mickey Rourke plays the villain in this movie. I believe his name is Whiplash, and he hates Tony because his dad hated Tony's dad. And so, yeah. While you got that going on, you also have a competition that arises between Justin Hammer and Hammer Tech Industries, played by Sam Rockwell, who I gotta say was having a lot of fun in this movie. There we have it. We have Iron Man 2, a movie that is clearly not as good as the first one, but that's not why it's a flawed movie. Like, you can have a sequel and it's not as good as the first one, and you can still enjoy it as a movie. Case in point, Kingsman: The Golden Circle, which came out last year. I didn't like that movie as much as I liked Kingsman: The Secret Service, which came out in 2015, but I still thought it was a pretty kick-ass sequel. Iron Man 2, however, suffers from a lot of problems. I did rewatch that movie for this review, and I gotta say, it's even worse than I remember. And let me get this out of the way before I even get into the litany of issues that this film has. Is this film all-time bad? In MCU standards, maybe. But if we're talking all-time bad in comic book films, no, it's not even close. Guys, I have seen a shit-tillion amount of comic book films in my lifetime. This movie does not scrape the bottom of the barrel. There are plenty of worse comic book films out there. This is not Catwoman. This is not Elektra. This is not Ghost Rider 1 or 2. This is not Superman 4 or Quest for Peace. This is not Batman and Robin type of bad. It's bad in terms of looking at it in the MCU, yeah, but in terms of comic book films, I don't really know that I can call it one of the worst I've ever seen. But oh my god, this one was really disappointing. I want to focus on the positive first, but it's kind of hard because there's very few things that I like about this movie. The one thing that you'll always like about any Iron Man movie, no matter how good or bad it is Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. He kills it as usual. In this movie, he's kind of dealing with some self-destructive issues because he has discovered that the piece of the arc reactor thing that he has in his chest, it is pushing shrapnel towards his heart and it's poisoning him, and as a result, he's dying. And just like any true narcissist would if they found out that they were dying, he starts exhibiting some self-destructive behavior. He starts drinking a little bit more. He starts causing problems for Stark Industries, and so Pepper has to step in to try to save his ass. Really, the movie is about him trying to figure out a way to save his life while also becoming a better person for it. And Robert Downey Jr. does the best he can with the material that he's working with. Like I said before, Don Cheadle is in this movie as Rhodey, his best friend, aka War Machine, because he does steal one of Tony Stark's suits and becomes War Machine by the end of the movie. I thought Don Cheadle is actually an upgrade over Terrence Howard. I think he performs better. I think he has better chemistry with Robert Downey Jr. And his character is given a little bit more to do in this movie. Terrence Howard in the first movie, really all he did was just stand around and bitch at Tony about shit. This movie, Rhodey has a bigger role. He has more of an axe to grind with Tony, and so it makes more sense why he's given more screen time and more to do, and I like it. The movie does have some cool visuals and some pretty cool action sequences. I mean, you can't say that Marvel doesn't know how to shoot good action. There is a scene early on in this film where Whiplash and Iron Man get into a big old scrap on a NASCAR racetrack. Yeah, Tony is on a NASCAR racetrack. He's racing a car. I can't really remember what it's for, but Whiplash crashes the party. He has these electric whips or whatever. He crashes Tony's car, and then the rest of the scene is about Pepper and Happy trying to get Tony his suit while at the same time avoiding Whiplash, because Whiplash, you know, he's there to kill everybody. That scene was actually pretty cool. There's also another cool action scene towards the end of the movie that involves a whole bunch of unmanned drones. And so yeah, there's some decent action in this movie, but one of my biggest problems in this movie is the fact that there is a little bit too much going on from a narrative standpoint. Narrative is much more sloppy this time around. There are more subplots that clash with each other in this movie and don't really help the quality of the film as it progresses. The subplot about Tony dying. There's the subplot about Pepper taking over Stark Industries. There's the subplot about Mickey Rourke and his revenge plan against Tony. The subplot about Justin Hammer and him trying to improve his company's chances of competing with Stark. Then you have Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury dropping in and leaving Avengers clues and hints. You have Scarlett Johansson infiltrating Stark Industries so that she can spy on Tony, I guess. And you have other shit, like the fact that Tony's father somehow left him the secret blueprint to creating a new element or something that nobody knew about. You have all these different ideas clashing on top of Tony and his struggle with alcoholism in this movie, and none of it really coalesces. A lot of it feels crammed, and a lot of it is at odds with each other. As a result, this movie is bogged down by the subplots instead of being elevated by them. Like I say, I am a comic book reader. I am a big fan of Iron Man comics, and I have read the comics where his alcoholism is a big issue for the character. The biggest issue with Tony and the way they portray his struggle with alcoholism in this movie is the fact that they treat it kind of like a joke. I mean, you do have that one scene where he's at his house and it's his birthday party and he's in his suit. He pees in his suit and he's endangering civilians and he's drunk basically. And then Rhodey goes and grabs a suit and they get into a fight. Really, Tony's struggle with alcoholism is a really deep and dark departure for his character in the comics, and it really would have been great to see that portrayed on screen, and we never really see that. A lot of it is played off as humor. The issue with this is that in future movies, this is never really brought up again. This is never really referenced again. It's pretty much just a brief section in this movie, and that's it. I suppose that's more of a complaint with the Marvel Universe in general as opposed to this movie, but it originated in this movie, so I gotta talk about it. It just always rubbed me the wrong way that Tony and his struggle with alcohol wasn't more at the forefront of the story for this movie. It kind of gets brushed aside along with the other film's many subplots. I'll also say that after that fight with Whiplash, the pacing of this movie hits a fucking wall. Really, for the next hour plus of this movie, nothing really happens. It's just endless scenes of Tony feeling bad for himself and other people being mad at Tony, Samuel L. Jackson giving him advice, Mickey Rourke stroking a bird. I mean, it's pretty much that, wash, rinse, repeat for over an hour. By the time we get to the finale of the film, unlike most Marvel movies, I'm bored out of my mind and I'm waiting for the movie to wrap up. Then we get into Mickey Rourke as Whiplash. As far as Whiplash goes, Mickey Rourke, I suppose, isn't bad performance-wise, although he does need a way more convincing Russian accent than the one that he gives in this movie. The biggest problem with him being a villain, besides the fact that he's pretty much just Iron Man in a cracked mirror, is the fact that Sam Rockwell as Justin Hammer is more of a villain in this movie than he is. I'm not taking anything away from Sam Rockwell. Sam Rockwell is amazing and he's awesome as Justin Hammer, but I guess that's the point. He is so awesome that it starts to take away and detract from Mickey Rourke as a villain. You feel like in this movie, Justin Hammer gets more screen time. You feel like he is more important to the plot of the movie than Mickey Rourke as Whiplash is. As a result, sometimes when Mickey Rourke is on screen stroking his bird and obsessing over building drones, you get kind of bored. Then we get to the end of the movie and he's supposed to have this big epic fight scene with Tony and it never happens. Tony and Rhodey fight off a whole bunch of drones and then Whiplash comes in there and they have like a 30-second fight scene and that's it. As far as Scarlett Johansson fitting into this movie, you can tell that she's really only there because she's hot and because they have to show her in some kind of action to get you excited for her appearance in the Avengers later. And that's another big complaint that people have with this movie, is that it spends more time focusing on building up the Avengers, referencing what's going to come, as opposed to focusing on the movie that's right there in front of them. Samuel Jackson literally is in the movie just to give exposition about other things that are going on in the Avengers universe. He's not really there to service the story except to tell Tony, hey, your father made up an element and you have to discover it or something. So instead of this movie standing on its own as a worthy sequel to the first Iron Man movie, it feels more like a 2-hour commercial for the next Avengers movie with a whole bunch of other subplots that clash with each other and don't really work. I don't fucking hate this movie, like I can't trash it the way that I want to, but at the same time, it's a movie that I really don't want to watch again. It's that close to being awful, but there are worse comic book movies out there, so maybe I'm being a little bit lenient. Side note, Rhodey does go into Tony Stark's basement and he steals one of his suits and then he gets in a fight with Tony and then he flies away. Samuel Jackson makes a joke about this in the next scene after Tony is, you know, eating a donut on top of a donut. This just reminds me that in these movies, there's nothing really special about operating one of Tony Stark's suits. Pretty much anybody can just take his suit and operate it with little to no problem. Tony, even when he created the suit, had some issues, so it just seems kind of weird that everybody else can kind of use his suits without any kind of problem. The movie comes really close to being awful, but I can't quite put it there, so instead, I'm going to give Iron Man 2 the kryptonite treatment. Hey guys, so those are my thoughts on Iron Man 2. Very disappointing sequel. What were your thoughts on Iron Man 2? And did you like it more than Iron Man 3, which I will talk about in the next few weeks? Like and subscribe to the Superfan Show, and as always, if you like what you see, tell me how you feel, and stay tuned to hear more from the Man of Steel. Peace.